I am going to dispense with the approval of the minutes for now and go right to new business. The commissioners invited Bruce Chimento, who is the Director of Public Works, to our meeting this evening, along with Chris Torre, who is the Tree Warden, and Senior Engineer Mike Yosak, who is involved in designing of sidewalks primarily and other things. So we're really appreciative of your coming here and meeting with us tonight. Many of our residents came to our the POCD, Plan of Conservation and Development meetings, and talked about some concerns for the district and for greater Norwalk. And pedestrian safety was high amongst their concerns. And just to clarify for the residents that are here, we're not here to discuss the Bailey Beach sidewalk or tree project. That is a different meeting that we're going to be having in the fall. And we're really not here to discuss the dam project at the duck pond. That was a different meeting as well, but Bruce and his associates are going to just kind of review a little bit about procedures if residents are interested in having sidewalks, and give us sort of what the rules are and how we might be able to have some positive impact on sidewalks. Yes.
I'd like to add some.
Commissioner Neary would like to.
I think we should all recognize Councilman Livingston,
I'm sorry.
whose birthday it is today.
What a great way to spend birthday.
And he gave up his birthday to join us.
Oh, yeah, what a great way. That's
Yeah.
whatever.
Thank you, sorry for being remiss and pointing out. And also from the district, Commissioner Neary, Commissioner Barbas over there behind the camera, property manager Ed Carlson, assistant property manager Jason O'Donnell, district treasurer Jim Hendrickson, and district clerk Andrea Woodworth. And I think I got everybody. Here's another elected official, and I can't see you. Raise your hand. I'll be happy to recognize you as well. No, okay. So then what I would like to do is just ask Mr. Chimento to just sort of give us an overview of how the DPW kind of goes about doing its assignments of whether road paving, sidewalk and or footpath pavings. Maybe you can give us a definition of a sidewalk versus a footpath. And then if residents have questions, if we can ask them of you, or suggestions, if we can give those to you. That is okay.
Yeah, I'll just sit here and talk like
No,
we
or
stand
maybe you
up
could
or
just turn around and face
whatever.
audience. You don't need to
Whatever
stand.
you
Maybe you
like.
just turn your chair.
Anyway,
You can face, I know.
You wanna sit
what
here?
it
No,
is.
I'm okay.
People,
Yeah, you wanna sit
I'm
here?
not that I'm counting, but I'm retiring in 71 days, but I'm not.
Yeah,
counting.
perfect, here.
Have a seat over here now.
Have a seat over here,
Move around
and
this
maybe
one.
more conversation.
I could do that, even.
Okay.
Contrary to some popular belief, we don't have a pot that just builds sidewalks, or actually footpaths. The sidewalks that are built are usually part of a project that we're doing, and a lot of that is because of we're repaving a road with existing sidewalks. And if the sidewalks are deemed to be insufficient to handle foot traffic, we would replace those sidewalks. Usually they're concrete sidewalks. Understand that all sidewalks that we put in must meet ADA requirements. Americans with Disability. So all of our sidewalks that we put in are 5 feet wide, and we have ADA ramps that have to be put in with textile pads to meet, again, requirements with the certain types of elevations that go in. So if you were to say that when an XYZ street needs to have sidewalks, that would be a capital project that would be submitted through the capital improvement program through the city of Norwalk. And we would put an estimated cost on that, and it would go into the capital budget program that would be going down the road to be approved by the mayor, by the planning commission, by the common council, and everyone else. And once it becomes a project, then we can look at it to design the project And depending on where it is and what kind of permits we need, whether it be a zoning permit or a building permit, not usually building permit, or a state permit to build it, then we would go out and, design it, have public hearings on it, and, bid it. Now, that's a sidewalk on city property. If we're taking property, either through easements or property takings officially, that's a whole different ballgame. There would have to be hearings held, on our property. Each property owner that would be involved would have maps, and we would take easements. There would be public hearings on that. There would be something that is called a freeholders program that would go through. Those are hearings by 3 disinterested people that live in the city somewhere else other than where we're putting in the sidewalk. And they would determine whether it's a viable thing to take the property or not. We have to go through what is known as an 824 review, which is a review done by the planning commission on either taking or buying or acquiring property for this type of project. It's a long drawn out process. It doesn't matter whether it's a strip of land that's a foot wide or a half an acre. Same process, same thing happens, same maps are done, and we just go that way. So, if we were to say that we're going to put sidewalks in, a request was made to put sidewalks in on a certain street, we would look at it, we would do preliminary estimates of what it would cost us, and then we would put that in through the capital budget program. I think I started with that. And nothing would happen until that was approved, because I'm not gonna take staff and engineering time in designing something that may never happen. So we just wait until it's approved through the budgeting program, and then we move ahead with the project. Footpaths were something that was developed in the early 70s. Unfortunately, I was here at the time and was very much involved with footpaths. And we sprinkled footpaths all over town. Right now, footpaths, if you wanna call it a footpath, has to meet ADA requirements for the federal government and the state government. So if we were to put in this so-called footpath, it would be 5 feet wide with curbing. We can mix the materials up from asphalt to concrete. In certain areas, the state requires concrete. You can see a good example of that up near Rowayton School on Highland Avenue, where we put in concrete, it's called extruded concrete curbs, and asphalt, but they are 5 feet wide. And again, the main sidewalk down into the school, it's the same thing. And we'll be redoing the parking lot and some other crosswalk stuff there also. But again, we meet ADA requirements on everything that we do, whether it be sidewalks, footpaths, roads, anything else, lights, warnings, signs.
If I may ask, if you were to get a request to consider a street for sidewalks, and you've outlined the process, how long would that realistically take? If
Well,
we were
let's
to go
assume-
for this year's budget. for
Yeah, let's
example.
assume that we're done with this year's budget. So let's assume that we have a request, and we look at it, we say, okay, it's gonna cost X to put in a sidewalk from A to B. And, we would do some preliminary numbers on that, really, and we would add it to our list of capital improvement programs. And they would be submitted in December of this year for approvals for next July. And if it were approved by going through all of these procedures that we go through, if it were approved, then we would know that we have a project. So then we would expend our time and effort in design, in permits, in getting things designed. If there's property takings, we'd have to go through the property takings and the maps and that type of stuff.
you ever reprioritize something that is clearly a higher need than something that's already been budgeted and approved?
We don't try to do that,
I don't know.
unless it's really, really bad.
Yeah.
But, we give every project, this is a project, this is what it costs, this is what the needs are, and this is what it is. Everybody gets that definition of what's happening, and the people that are making the decisions see that, and we have public hearings on it. And feel free, if you're involved with any of that, come to the public hearings, please, and voice it, and they listen to you, trust me, they do. The squeaking wheel, does get grease on it. So if you come and if you have a project that you wanna talk about, please come to the public hearing. There's a couple of them, especially with the capital budget, and it finally ends up at the council, the mayor, and then the council.
Can I just clarify something, Tim? Your question, I think, was priority. I think what Bruce is talking about, if I'm wrong, is after the money's been allocated, you treat them the same. But I think in terms of the budget process, when it's put forward, when this is the council, we look at which seems more important, right? Which
It's a
is the-
recommendation from Public Works.
That's
and the-
correct.
And the council will fund the recommendation or not fund the
Right,
recommendation.
but we'll look at, what seems to be more. needed.
That's correct, that's
So
correct.
what percent of the projects that get into your pipe in the beginning end up getting approved and executed?
It varies too much. It depends on the year and what is important to the city, and to the area. This year we have schools. We got cut back pretty much, pretty big. There's a level that Bob Barron, the financial director, and the mayor knows what they have to go at. If they have to spend X number of dollars here, then that's gonna reduce dollars here. Our road paving program has been going along pretty well. I know that the sidewalks got removed this year. There's several other projects that got removed. I mean, I understand there's a level. There's only so much stuff you can put in a bag, and this is what we gotta live with.
But to put more of a timeline on it, realistically, if you were to go in December and request a sidewalk project, and it's put in the budget, and it passes through the mayor, passes through the council, it's approved, you're not gonna start planning the project until
Till July.
July following year,
Right.
okay? Then the design.
And the other process would take place.
The design and implementation might take another year?
Oh, yeah.
Or 2 years?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And if the council or the mayor delays it, or says this is a good project, but I don't wanna do it this year, I do it next year,
That's also.
so we're easily looking at 3 to 4 years,
Oh, yeah.
get something done.
Yeah, that's a normal sequence. Only because, you've got a lot of legal stuff to go through. Once you get the approvals, there's a lot of legal stuff that has to go through. You have to go through, and it takes a while. So if we had a go on a project, the legal process would take over a year.
Can you just state your name if you ask a question,
Sure,
please?
Kurt Trisvenzik, a resident of Rowayton. What if a community was to help fund a project in full or at some percentage? Would that become a bigger priority?
No.
Or that wouldn't have any weight on the?
Wouldn't have done it at all.
And if, for example, you were doing a street that had, say, 20 houses on the side of the road that you wanted to create the sidewalk or footpath, if,
No, we wouldn't create the sidewalk. If we were paving a road that needed to be paved in our paving program, and there were no existing sidewalks, we would not necessarily put them in, unless they were a capital project, separately.
okay, that aside, could one property owner, if all the other property owners except for one or two or three or however many wanted the sidewalk to be on their property, could X number of residents prevent the whole project, or would you start it here and continue it there and keep the ones in the middle out?
No.
No, you have to have unanimous,
No, we would put, if it was felt that the community needed that sidewalk,
Mhm.
we would put the sidewalk in, if it's on city property.
Mhm.
Right, it doesn't stop anyone. A lot of times they'll have a new construction of a new house, and some requirements will be made that they have to put a sidewalk in. That's not us, that's the building department and the zoning department, but that can happen also. People can request that we wanna put sidewalks in front of our house, so then all that would require would be to take out a permit for the Department of Public Works and put the sidewalk in.
If I can just touch on in response to your question. If the community wanted to contribute money to the project, and make a donation, that would go into the general fund, and you cannot earmark anything in the general fund for specific purpose. So, we'd have to find another way.
Yeah, see, that's why my answer was no. I mean, you could say, well, I wanna donate $10,000 to put in a sidewalk, and I'll donate it to the city. Well, that goes into the general fund, it has to be withdrawn from the general fund, all special appropriations.
But it can't be earmarked.
Sure. If you could just touch a little bit more on if residents were to give up their property in a sort of very clear and identified path, let's just say there's a quarter-mile stretch, 10 houses, whatever it may be, everyone was in agreement. You sort of touched on it, you could quickly get a permit to do something like that, how would that process work? It was more coming from a standpoint of a community organizing
I'm
together.
hearing that two ways.
Yeah, before you answer, because I think the other question's related to that, could you describe what city property is with respect to road?
I'm saying that there's two ways on that.
Sorry.
If you're out front on city property, and the city, if there's a deem a worthwhile project, could put in a sidewalk and a city property, city right of way. City right of ways can vary throughout the city because it's an older city. Normally, we have 50-foot right of ways. A lot of people think that, the edge of the pavement is city property. No, probably 8 or 10 feet beyond that. So if it goes into private property and a private person wants to put in a sidewalk, then they would do the same, as I said, they would take out a permit with this city to do that, with my department to do that. And we would make sure what the plans were right and it's put into, according to our specifications, and that would be fine. But, for a group of people to get together and say, well, we're gonna put in, we wanna put in a sidewalk, that's possible. That's possible. You would pay for it, take out the permits, and we would do it, as long as it's on the city property. All right, because what happens on private properties in areas.
And you said the right of ways are,
See, I don't
varies.
like to talk right of ways, because in some areas, they're 40 feet wide, 45 feet wide, or 50 feet wide. We usually have 50 feet wide. So if you're looking at the center of the road, 25 feet over from the center of the road is the property line. Very, very rough. And, we have a GIS system here that I have a map here that I'll show you in some of the areas that draws approximately where the property lines are, and it's the government information system. That's what it's called. What we call it is get it surveyed, because, it could be anywhere. And these are off the tax maps, and sometimes they're not that accurate.
And it varies from street to street. One street may have a 1-foot city right away from the edge of
That's
pavement,
correct.
and one might have 15.
Yeah.
And it's honestly from block to block.
it depends on the width of the road. And here in Rowayton, we have a lot of older roads that are maybe narrower than newer roads. Would that be?
Well, it's a standard 50-foot, like Bruce was saying, but I'll give you, for instance, Kafkasha Beach Road is probably a 70-foot wide street, because it's a 4-lane road with a center median. But on either side of that edge of pavement where the sidewalk is, the city has a right-of-way of 20 feet. We almost go up to their front door of right-of-way. So if we wanted to put double-wide sidewalks in, like Bruce was saying, we could. But every street from block to block is
Bell
different.
Island, if we look at Bell Island,
Yeah.
look at Bell Island. Now, on Highland Avenue, that's probably 50 feet, wild guess,
What
probably.
is Hunt Street?
Probably 15, but I don't know
Okay,
off
but
the top of my head.
and it differs, and which and Hunt
Hi.
are a continuum down to the train station.
Yeah, we did.
I'd like to, if I may, I'd like to come back to your question in a second, but I'd like to point out that Bruce is the director of the DPW. So he would be doing the budgets and working with the committee, the Common Council Committee, which is 7 committee members. Tom and I happen to be on that committee. So if the budget was approved, he then would go to our chief engineer here, Mike Yorson, who might design the sidewalk. And then when it had to be implemented, we'd have Chris Torrey, who would then implement it with his department. So just so you know who the players are. So,
Thank you.
I'm sorry, the question,
That's
that-
okay.
that's it.
Bet.
You talk about the difficulty of putting in sidewalks, and money is always an issue in right-of-ways, and I have a reverse question. I live on the corner of Highland and Wilton, and when we had the property, we had to put a sidewalk in on our side. There is a very narrow footpath across the way, which is actually more dangerous by its presence because of, one, the condition of the footpath. And so people end up not being able to put their stroller or whatnot and walking in the street. Is there anything that DPW can do about removing that so that the surface of the road is wider and flatter as opposed to, so people can walk more to the side than actually in the traffic lane?
I'll give you a definite maybe. Possibly we can do
Because
that.
there's several places in town where the footpaths are in such poor condition. You find the joggers, the bikers, the strollers in the street rather than on.
So another way to ask the question is, does the city prioritize non-ADA compliant footpaths, which is what you've got there, right?
Right.
Removing them.
Removing them
Well,
and
but-
making them
Well,
less of
either,
a
either
hazard.
But
make them
I'm-
compliant or get rid of them.
No, that we would remove them, and
Mhm.
making them compliant would be a whole different.
To that point, all along between where Witch makes the corner with Hunt,
Yeah.
up to your
Mhm.
corner, I guess, I can't.
No,
you
I'm
said-
not, I'm way,
You're-
I'm
okay,
I'm
you're-
just
Wait,
not-
I heard
down
Highland,
on
I
Highland
didn't-
Avenue.
But, there's a footpath all along there,
Along which,
along Witch, yeah,
Along
from,
Witch.
well, from Littlebrook, which is terribly maintained. I mean, it could probably be 3 feet wide, but you only get about a foot just because of all the debris. But it's used, and I would hate to see that go away because it's the only footpath that our kids over in that
We-
corner can get to
Let me get one
school.
thing straight, we would not go out and just remove it, there would be a public hearing on it, and it would have to be deemed necessary to remove it. But I think we ought to, well, you mentioned poorly maintained.
Yes, that was gonna be my next.
Sidewalks and footpaths are maintained by the adjacent property owner. We can order the homeowner to go out and repair the sidewalk and make it ADA compliant. I haven't done that, it has been done in the past, actually probably about 4 years ago. We just had a request today through one of the councilmen that, the guy said that the sidewalk is in very bad shape and, we gotta do something about it. And so I let the councilman know that he's got a choice. I could send him a letter and order him to fix the sidewalk, or I could ignore the request,
Oh, wow.
so.
But why
that's-
would that be if the city has the right of way and it's not the homeowner's property?
The ordinance,
This is
the
the
ordinance
ordinance.
says very clear,
Well,
that the
snowplow.
homeowners are responsible for maintaining, making sure the sidewalks are clear of snow, of ice, of bushes, of debris, and anything else you can think of. It's the adjacent homeowner that's responsible for the sidewalks,
Even though it's not
absolutely.
compliant?
And isn't that Bruce state law, actually?
Pardon me?
Isn't that state law?
I believe it is,
Yeah, that is my.
Can I ask a question?
If
So
you could
what
try to
about,
identify yourself, so we see who you are speaking back
Oh,
there.
okay.
okay,
Looks like a
so,
black hat.
what about putting just white line to make like a 3-foot strip where the roads are wide enough for pedestrians?
That's
Just-
cheating.
It's cheap,
Um,
that's cheap.
That's called a shoulder stripe.
Yeah,
We do put that in some areas, but we don't do that for pedestrians, it's just for traffic control.
so let's
If we
control
did
the
it, if we
traffic.
actually did it for pedestrians, that would not be legal.
It wouldn't be what?
Legal.
Well, so let's put it for traffic control.
Well, and would DPW consider making that those bridge on one way, which was a suggestion, which, you know, could slow down the traffic, which
Imagine you get some
is.
pushback on that.
Oh, we get a lot of pushback.
I would imagine. Again, that would go to the traffic authority on a request through the DPW and through people, and they would have to have a public hearing on it, and we would hear what the public have to say about that. I did see some requests on that. One person wanted to make, Hunt Street one-way eastbound, and another one wanted to make Witch Lane one-way westbound. And I said, that would work, we'd put a parking lot in the middle, and everybody could just park right there, and there would be no problem. But yes, we did have those requests, they didn't get very far, and if anybody wants to make a real request on that, it would be considered at the traffic authority, which is not the DPW.
Yeah.
You get some pushback from emergency services too for
Oh,
doing
yeah,
something like that.
yeah.
Bruce, if the residents of specifically the sixth taxing district were to sort of prioritize what we felt were either the worst, the roads that were in most need of a footpath or a sidewalk, should we couple it with the roads that most need to be paved? Because is it usually, easier to get the sidewalk when you're paving a road as opposed to just going for a new sidewalk?
No. If we have a paving program for a road, and, just say it's Bluff Avenue, Witch Lane or something like that, there's no sidewalks there. So we would just pave the road, not necessarily sidewalks, we would not necessarily put sidewalks in because the road is being repaved. We would put sidewalks in if there's existing sidewalks and they need to be repaired. We're doing that in some sections of South Norwalk at this point. We have a center city core that requires concrete sidewalks at first out here. We could put in what we did up at, Rowayton School, and those, I think, look pretty good. And they're, you know, very usable. But in some cases, in the center cities, we're required to put in, you know, concrete sidewalks. But if we're doing a road that has no sidewalks, we would not necessarily put in sidewalks.
So what would be the best way for us to advocate a real sidewalk from Highland Avenue to Rowayton Avenue, down Witch and onto Hunt, so that people could get to the train station? And from the north side of Witch Lane to the south side of Witch Lane safely, so they could get to town and the elementary school?
Send a request to me at the Department of Public Works to
Within
include
the
that
next
type of a
71
project.
days.
Yeah, you gotta do it in 71 days. But request that be a capital budget program for those sidewalks. And I would put it in, and my successor would put it in as a program to put sidewalks on that road.
I believe that we
Is
have
it-
done this a number of times. Do you have any record of that, like, we've been requesting that, or?
Other than some people talking to me about it, I need a formal request for that.
Let me ask you a question. Does it benefit us to have the letter come from the 3 commissioners? Or would we be better off having a petition from the community?
I'd say both. A letter coming from the commissioners would certainly help, and a petition from the community would be best. So I'd say, yeah, both. And we would add it, we'd have no reason not to, we would add it to our request. Now, how far that goes depends.
If I may just expand on one of your answers to Betsy. You're asking to remove some of the footpaths that are in bad shape. So,
The ones that are totally unusable.
yeah, part of the problem, though, we've looked at footpaths like that. It's the unusable because a tree's roots have gotten in there and heaved it all the way up. But that tree is sometimes on private property. So if we cut the roots out to make it flat so people can walk, then we're killing a tree, or we have to ask the person that lives there to remove that tree. So it's not easy, is all I'm trying to point out. It gets a little twists and turns, it's complicated.
Hi, I'm Robin Kammer. I live on Gilbert Hill between Tomes and Woodbine, and so my kids go across Hunt and Witch a lot, and it's like, oh my god, watch out for the cars. On Hunt, there's a very small section of a sidewalk, and I've only lived here 12 years. But why is there only a small section instead of the entire? I mean, could that help our case that there's a small section already in existence?
If you're asking me why there's a small section, I
Well, I'm
have
just
no
asking if it would
idea.
help, like if it's gonna help.
And would it help?
Pre-existing.
Probably not.
Okay, and then my second question is this petition that we could have, would it help if we had the 6 taxing district, the petition, and then letters, you know, from each
petition-
homeowner?
The
Or is the
petition
petitions
would
enough?
suffice for a letter.
You don't wanna
If-
hear
if
like the
everybody,
compelling
we get a
reasons?
petition up with people, yeah.
That's where going to the DPW meetings
Got
comes
it.
in,
Yeah.
right?
With children in tow,
Certainly helps.
just saying. Biking in.
Just one point.
I
When you
got
go
one.
to the DPW committee meeting, if you wanna speak on the subject, it has to be on the agenda.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
you just can't come in and speak about any topic.
Which you can at the Board of Ed, just FYI.
Oh.
Just saying.
In the back and then over there and
Chris,
over there.
I live on Crest Road. I'm in the process of moving to Jacob Street, to the old law house. So my question, I understand that it's hard to change these things, and there's a process to it. So, and I'm also a former cyclist, a recovered cyclist, so I understand those laws pretty well in Connecticut. Let's assume that we don't change anything, for example, where Hunt comes off Rowayton Avenue, you've got a steep hill, and is close to the train, is something that people use. If you've got a baby, and we don't change anything, so there's no sidewalk there, you've got a baby jogger coming down the hill, you got a baby jogger going up the hill, and you've got aggressive non-Norwalk traffic commuting through there. What is the law for right-of-way in terms of, like, is it okay for those baby joggers to be using that street? Where are they supposed to be, and how far are the cars supposed to be away from them?
3 feet, is the distance, is it okay for them to use it? Yeah, is it dangerous? Yeah, but yeah, they can use it, it's a public street.
Okay.
Just on that question, if there's 3 feet and they don't give you 3 feet and you take down their license plate, what's the ramifications? Are there any?
No idea, I'm not a police officer,
Okay.
I have no idea.
This gentleman, and then over there, and then in the back.
Yeah, Robert Finch. Excuse me. I was just gonna ask this board, what is your assessment of Hunt and Witch in terms of safety? As the town is growing, more people, the joggers, the cyclists, what do you guys think?
I'll answer first, because I used to be a commuter, and I walked that way when I was commuting, and I still occasionally walk to the train station. I think it's extremely dangerous, from the stop sign at Hunt Street all the way down to Rowayton Avenue, but I always bail at, the Gilbert Hill, and was very grateful when that property was developed, that the owner deeded that little footpath there, because that's a saving grace for people that walk to the train station. We, the district, have sent letters in the past to a few homeowners along Hunt and on Witch to clean either their footpaths if they have them, to cut, there's some bushes there that need pruning. We've spoken to somebody about moving their fence. So we've tried to be as proactive as we can in a nice way. We don't have an authority to do that, but we can ask. We've done the same thing on Rowayton Avenue, between Hunt Street going north toward Tome Street, where some of the owners, their driveways are actually up on, Clifford. And some of them have a nice sort of garden or little grassy strip, but some of them, it's just weeds galore, and at this time of the year, all the, like, goldenrod and stuff is out into the street by a foot or so. The city painted the line there for us last year, which has been helpful, but we've written owners letters to please clean that up, and if they haven't, we've actually gone with district equipment and, cleaned up some of that brush to make it a little bit safer. So we're all for making these routes as safe as possible, and trying to work with the homeowners in the limited capacity that we have. And I'll let Mike or John speak to that.
I would just echo Tammy's comments, also say that I lived on Steepletop and commuted, and I found Hunt Street very dangerous, to the point I avoid driving it now. I just don't drive it. It's, coming up and down the hill, you never know who's coming up the other way. And I especially avoid driving it when school's almost open, or when school's just closed. And parents, are just crazed, picking up their kid on time, dropping their kid off. Unfortunately, I see them with cell phones to their ears, and it's not the out-of-towners exclusively, it's some of the people that live here. We have to police ourselves, so to speak, and tell those people it's dangerous. And gaining a minute or two to get your kid to school only endangers that kid. So.
And I'll just add, I lived at Hunt and Clifford years ago, and so I know with the through traffic there is crazy. And this, we don't have a lot of power as a 6 taxi district. If you look at our legal status to really have a big impact here, we can't do it ourselves. But that's why we called this meeting. We know there's a lot of frustration, and a lot of the kind of, state law ordinance as a start works against us. Then the narrowness of the street. There have been some efforts, I think, looking at Hunt and Witch before, and the logistics are very challenging. You really have to, I think, have owners contribute property. And, we've never gotten that critical mass. So we were kind of hoping with starting this meeting, Bruce, with all his experience, he was at DPW, left, came back. He has a long legacy here. He's going to be leaving soon. That's why we're having this meeting in July to kind of take advantage of his experience, what's possible, what's not possible. That's why they also brought these GIS maps. Is there even, and especially if we're really being forced to be 5 feet, for ADA, that's going to make the challenge that much harder. On the other hand, who would have ever thought we could have gotten those ADA sidewalks on Highland Avenue? Now, that was not a city project. I mean, the city oversaw it, but that was a Safe Routes to School, which is a federal program. That's how that all came about. The feds paid for a chunk of it. The DPW implemented it. My kid's in college, and he was in elementary school when that project was first looked at. That's how long it took. So Safe Routes to School isn't necessarily, the fastest way to get it done, but it did get done, and it's a great project. So, I think we are concerned, and we're trying to, incentivize getting this, getting something done there, because I think everyone realized it benefits us all. And I'll tell you, when I lived on Hunt Street, you really couldn't walk to town, because there's no safe way to do it. And John and Tom spent a lot of time and came up with the whole plan on Rowayton Avenue from the train station down to Cudlip Street. And to tell you the truth, some of the neighbors killed it, and they kind of, they put 2 years into it and finally called it a day. And then the other problem is the state of Connecticut is super user unfriendly. And the people who built those 2 new houses there opposite the United Church, they wanted to put in a sidewalk or footpath. And the state made all these crazy demands. They had to move utility poles, do all this stuff. It was going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars. And in the end, DPW was like, look, just put grass and, see what happens. And that's what they've done. So it's really, really challenging and really difficult. One thing that could be, and I think, John has looked at is, potentially, should the ordinance, could it be modified? Could you figure out some way that the abutter is not responsible? Who knows how it could be done? Could the 6TD help, or the RCA in some way, especially with their junior member crew? We tried to do that with, kids who walk to school, to the middle school and high school. Highland Avenue's been such a disaster. This winter wasn't so bad, but 2 winters ago it was horrible. And there were a group of us that went and cataloged all the people who didn't clear their sidewalks and reported them to the city. So, it's not simple. It's not as simple as it should be.
I'd like to just add to my comment. Tom and I represent District E, which is not just Rowayton, but West Norwalk and a couple of other communities. And this problem we're experiencing is not just in Rowayton. It's in West Norwalk as well. Narrow roads that have been there forever, cars that are curvy, no footpaths, people want to drive on them, so we're trying to come up with an overall plan, and they're working on it. And they're asking for more walkability, which is going to put pressure on us to look at spots to do this. Again, you heard how long it might take for one sidewalk. To do this is going to take years. So don't expect results tomorrow.
That doesn't mean we shouldn't try.
That's right, and we're gonna continue to try, sorry, the gentleman,
Yeah,
Mr.
Gary
Lees,
Reeves,
and then
on
in the
Hunt
back.
Street. You guys talk about how dangerous it is on Hunt Street. I wonder why we don't have speed bumps like on Old Trolley. That is one road where nobody, or at least I don't go more than 20 or 25 because of the beautiful way in which those speed bumps are positioned. I can tell you, we sit on our porch during rush hours, and it's ridiculous to see the speed. And I think the first thing, and hopefully this is something that can be done, and we ought to put in, if we write a petition or something, that there should be speed bumps on that section of the road that slow traffic down at least before you may get your sidewalks. And I don't know why we don't do that as a first step.
Let Mr. Chimento answer that.
Well, maybe two of us might want to go into this. There's no possible way speed bumps will be put in Norwalk at this time. Speed bumps do not work. Most
How can you say speed bumps don't work?
Most people that have speed bumps on their street wish they were not there. We get requests for them to be removed. What happens is that people, when they hit speed bumps, go over the speed bump and then speed up. Get to the first speed bump, slow down, get to the next one, go over it, speed up. It's been shown across the country that speed bumps do not slow traffic down the entire way. Mike?
That's correct, there's a lot of studies out there that say that. Also a couple other problems, when you put a speed bump on a street, you have unintended consequences. Traffic finds another place to go, and you just put the problem on another street.
Well, that wouldn't be such a bad idea.
And there's another little issue that we have to deal with, and it's called the liability issue. If we've got a speed bump and we're talking about Old Trolley Way or something like that, the guy tears down that street, hits a speed bump, tears out the back end of his car, he sues the city. Because the city put an impediment to the street. We have something in the street that caused that accident. So the cities and towns, even though they could pass ordinances, are liable for that.
Is there
If
anything that-
anybody, heaven forbid somebody gets hurt.
So what are the other alternatives
To mitigate
to
speed.
slow the traffic down in the section, particularly from the stop sign at Which to the hill going up? What other things can be done? Flashing the speed, flashing that, putting crosswalks in that blink now, we have that slow down for the school. What are the alternatives that can be put in if you can't do speed bumps?
I would suggest other streets and communities in Norwalk have done this. The police department, if you call and request, will put in flashing signs that tell you your speed. They also count the cars and the average speed of the cars. Just getting that information provided to the police department would be a big step in approaching the common council and saying, hey, the average speed is 47 miles an hour that people are going from when they turn onto Hunt Street from Rowayton till they get to Which. And that is a big step, and that is real data and real documentation.
What did they do with the data that they collected several years ago?
Not even.
Well, I don't think you
If I may
really know
add-
that. I think the data showed that the average 85% speed was 27 miles an hour.
If I may add, the police department just got 2 new speed trailers with the flashing light. It records a lot of information. I was surprised at how much. They tested it on Bluff Avenue, and I actually watched cars slow down.
Yes.
The police department's working in conjunction with the RCA and coming up with a program to move that speed trailer
Around
to
town.
other areas. It's rare.
Yeah, no, around town.
Yeah, so, you know, I think working with the RCA and the police department, you'll get the sign on your street at some point. They just have to find a place to put it.
I really think that for commuters, because we do have that temporary walk from Steeple Top, to the cross at the path for the train station, that perhaps we should have a white crosswalk there with the lights that indicate people are entering that crosswalk. I've seen that in Acton, Massachusetts, and it's very effective. They put in a new little development, and when those lights go and somebody's entering the crosswalk, it's very effective. And I just think that we ought to look at alternatives to do whatever we can to slow down the traffic on Hunt, and because you're years away from getting any type of sidewalks.
Gentleman in the back's been waiting very patiently. Sorry, I don't.
Connie's the resident here. Follow up on the question about the white stripe, I mean, kind of shoulder stripe. Would a bike lane, if it happens the same thing, is that illegal as well?
Bike lane, and on that road, they vary from 4 to 5 feet wide. And the only reason that we would put one in is that it'd have to meet that requirement. What you're doing is you're shrinking down the travel portion that the car is gonna go down. We try to keep it a minimum of 10 foot for a car. So if you have 10 feet of car and then 5 feet of bike lane, then you've got 15 feet. You don't even have that for the whole length of the road. Width of the road, I should say.
Mr. Chimento, I just thinking about raising funds that was shown in the, if communities, say the Hunt Street Alliance, were to raise money and offer it as a grant for sidewalks, and the grant would not be paid until the sidewalks are completed or in the process of construction.
I don't know the answer to that.
That would avoid the money from going into the general fund.
I'm not so sure of that. You get, the finance director would have to answer that. I don't know. I don't know the answer to
So
that.
if we have a nonprofit organization raising these monies, and they're offering a grant, will you take advantage of that grant?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Of course.
I think the question is, can they specify
I don't know
grant?
whether.
Yes, they could say a sidewalk grant from
Right.
6 taxes.
So they can specify the
Yeah.
grant.
Won't give them money left.
I'm not so sure. I mean, Bob
I'll
Barrett
talk to
is
Lieber.
I just sort of had
Sorry,
Michael
state your
Diamond,
name.
yep, Michael Diamond, Richmond. I had sort of a bit more of a process question, which is, it seems to me there's a set of possible solutions to traffic calming. And you as experts, you and Mike and others in DPW, could enable us to go through a sort of process to say, okay, here's that long list of different things one might do. Here's, the reasons why they might work, the reasons they might not work, the costs involved, the criteria that we need to demonstrate, whether it's 85% speed or whatever it is. But as opposed to it sort of bouncing around and everyone sort of feeling their way through it, there's a very significant body of knowledge and expertise about traffic calming and traffic management. And I want to know how we might avail ourselves of that in a more formal, structured way, so we can get something done.
Well, we look at it, clearly we're trying to see what we could do legally to try to help that situation. Mike does a lot of studies. Mike, you'd like to get Mike? Mike is the guy that's our transportation guy, traffic lights, traffic calming, bike lanes, the whole schmear. And we look at a lot of things, and it's just something that we don't want to ignore. But it's something that if it works, we'll look at it.
But I'm asking perhaps for something a bit more practical, so maybe we could invite Mike back to make a presentation and say, sorry, I'm a recovering consultant, so I'm thinking of a matrix. You've got lists of streets, intervals between streets, whatever, and lists of traffic calming, solutions. And there may be a whole subset of them which you can't include, like bumps, what you call speed bumps for various reasons. But there may be others that you say, yes, bike lane is the optimal answer here. Stripe, what have you called, passenger sidewalk stripes are great here. New pavement, new sidewalk here. But let's just do that in a formal way, rather than bopping around all the time, you know, and I'd love to hear, so we all have the same knowledge, or perhaps not the same knowledge, but we share Mike's knowledge about what's the thinking about these different solutions. I mean, there are chicanes, there are different types of speed bumps, actually are flat, they have a different profile, you know. And clearly there are different constraints. We know there are legal constraints, there are financial constraints, there's emergency vehicle constraints, there's, you know, all sorts of constraints, but you can just lay all that out and we could come to some sort of conclusion that says, okay, maybe up here there's an option that works.
Yeah, we do have on our traffic webpage, there's a little application of you put in your type of street, and it'll give you ideas of what you can do on that street, what type of traffic calming works.
So could we have a workshop with you using that tool? Like, if the tool exists, that's great, but why don't we, you know, let's sit down with lists of streets and traffic calming devices and go through them and say, what might work?
I'd certainly be able to do something at some point.
If you make yourself available, that'd be wonderful, yeah.
We can do that. We can.
I have a question.
Yes, I'm
Sorry, thank you. I'm just curious,
Sorry,
sorry, you know, I know Trolley has the speed bumps, and I know Crockett has the speed bumps. And now, and you said there's a big liability issue, and now how do those bumps get there, and who
I wasn't sure, I sure wasn't here when it happened. But
Those happened years ago before they went again, you know, under Mayor Moshe, they were installed. They could not be on emergency access roads. So there's a map on the city's website. I can send it to you if you want to see it, of which streets are emergency access roads. Hunt, which are Rowayton Avenue, Highland Avenue. So it was kind of like non-busy streets, if you will. There was a formula they had under Dick Moshe. I think Hal Alvord was the DPW director at the time. And if an X percent of the residents wanted them, whatever, they did them. And so they were, that's how they were installed on Crockett and Trolley and Jacob at that time.
So the issue of liability, is that something that is?
That at the time there was a big lawsuit in Westport, I think, and that's what ended up triggering them stopping. It was, I think, before Bruce had gotten here, they decided they quit doing them. So I want to say those were installed on those streets maybe 15 years ago, and they quit doing them 10 years ago, something like that. So it's been a while.
Hey, Nelson, again, I had a question. I think you described sidewalks that are put in place by the city. Are there any circumstances under which a resident or homeowner can put in an architectural feature which happens to be a 3-foot or 5-foot wide concrete path in the front yard? Or do sidewalks only, this is an honest question, do sidewalks only get created and installed by the city?
No, as I said before, if a property owner wants to put a sidewalk in front of his house, then he would need to take out an encroachment permit that the city has, a DPW doesn't allow. Tell us what you're gonna do, show us what you're gonna do, we're just gonna make sure that it meets the ADA standards, our standards, go for it.
I just wanna say there's also something in the building department about putting in solid, non-pregnable, permeable, and if it's too much on your surface, you won't be able to do it. Cause I asked to do that in front of my property, and I was denied.
By who?
By the building.
Oh, building department? Oh,
And they said I couldn't put cobblestones,
Probably.
and I ended up putting rock.
Most likely, yeah.
So I just wanna be careful where you go.
But for
We're
all-
very friendly at DPW.
For all intents and purposes, if you want a sidewalk or a footpath, you start with the DPW, not the building department, not planning and zoning. So if, residents don't have any further questions, I'd like to offer, Chris and Mike, would you like to make any comments or add, or anything that you think would be helpful to residents, to facilitate, getting some new sidewalks in town here?
I thought there were a lot of great comments, and I think a good start would be to have Mike come do a demonstration, or a presentation on some traffic calming studies that have been taking place, and that what we've done to kind of address some of the concerns that were brought here in a more constructive way.
Then, Mike, would you like to do that? It's a pretty friendly group.
He's stuttering, so.
That means yes.
Yeah, certainly we could do something like that. That's a point.
That would be great, if we could get a little bit more specific with actual sites. I know you brought these, aerial maps, and would it be good for the residents to come to the commissioners and sort of with a list of, you know, is this possible here, there, or X, Y, Z, and then that way we could kind of drill down and then make our case and get our petition and our letter, or?
I think, Tammy, one thing that might be really helpful is if if you could just show us quickly on these maps on Hunt Street in particular, because I think that's a real flashpoint. What is physically possible? I think, or what, you know, if residents there really wanted sidewalks, what would it take? I mean, I have to believe, based on what I know as a real estate agent, that it, you know, it would take, people would have to contribute private property.
It's very narrow. It's like the more dangerous it is, the harder it's gonna be to get done, but that's why we need it even more.
This is our road, and we've overlaid a GIS property line area on it. If you can see it, this little.
Can you hold it up?
That's
This
Rowayton
Rowayton
Avenue. Rowayton Avenue,
Sorry.
this is high.
Do you mind holding that up,
Highland
Tammy?
Avenue here.
It's hard to identify.
Others leave that here, you have it. But you can,
Here's Witch and to Hunt,
That's
and
Witch
Rowayton
in the
Avenue,
Hunt.
train station's here,
That's
and
correct.
United Church with a light at Cudlip is right here.
That's correct,
Okay.
that's correct.
So maybe flip it the other way, Tammy.
180 degrees?
Just, yeah.
Well, either way, just hold it up so people can see it.
And then,
Great idea. Thank you.
Rowayton
Yeah, so
Avenue,
you're talking about
Cudlip.
right here.
Yeah, and this would be the end of it, this is Highland Avenue.
There's steeple top.
I mean, it's just not gonna show you a lot, we certainly couldn't use this for any designs or stuff. But you can see, you've got width here, all right, and you don't have that much width down there. And that's trouble, that's trouble for us, so, you know, we'd look at the whole thing all the way through, to the design. I have some, things, some here that are, smaller in width, that you can see the small end of it. This is a 100 scale, Mike?
That's 100 scale.
And we have we have a 40 scale, if you want, it's.
It's kind of hard to see with all the trees.
See, these are aerials. This'll just show you something a little bit more.
Does that have the right of way on it?
Pardon me?
Does that have the right of way on
We
it?
didn't put the right of way on it.
No, we can put it on this, but,
What information does that?
you know, again, it's a GIS right away, get it surveyed, you know, we don't.
Well, it might be a good starting place to know what the city has.
Yeah, I can actually leave these with you guys, if you wanna hold on to them. This is the same thing at a bigger scale. There's 4 of these, or 3 of these,
Without the property.
without the property line, but you can see the road, and you can see what's involved, especially with stone walls, trees, shrubbery, and that type of stuff. And again, you know, I can leave these, you guys can use these, if you wanna look at them.
Photos, the approximate property lines are on our city GIS website, so you can.
Yeah, you can actually go on the city website and go into engineering, into GIS mapping, and you can actually look at it, and you can actually see the property lines as GIS thinks they are, and you can see how wide it is. You can actually look at it in scale, and when you scale it off and you find out the width of the road is 22 feet, you know, we have problems with that.
Can you say the site again?
It's the city of Norwalk site. It's under, Department of Public Works.
Can you type in GIS notes?
I think you can just search by GIS, and it brings you to a page.
Yeah, if you go to GIS, it'll go right there.
Just search GIS map.
And can you tell us if Witch and Hunt Street are in the horizon for repaving?
I cannot tell you that right now, I don't know.
No, okay.
We
You
have
don't
a.
have a list in your mind?
I don't have the whole list. We're out 5 years, and there's a lot of roads out there.
Is that on the website too?
Pardon me?
Is that on the website?
That's on the website too, you can see, the list of paved roads. Yeah, it's a 5-year forecast that we use, and it varies a little bit depending on the money.
a way of saying thank you, I'd like to point out that there are 5 districts in the city, and we have 2 councilmen like Tom and I representing the various districts. And every one of those councilmen are calling on these 3 gentlemen to come out to their district to make such a presentation and so forth. So these guys are going all day long, repairing sidewalks and putting in streets, and then at night they're coming to talk with us. So we really appreciate it. Thank you for the time, and I look
If there's
forward
If there's any special requests, please do it before 71 days.
Do it before 70 days.
Yeah.
The
70
last day
days.
he has something to do other than have a celebration.
this gentleman used to jump off the Bluff Bridge.
I have a picture of myself and one of my best friends, Chris Hoyt, jumping off the Bluff Bridge into the water. We did that every year. There you go. Do it every year.
70 or 80, yeah.
Do it every year. I'll be excused.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Have a nice day.